Welcome to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. I'm a volunteer with Breathe California of the Bay Area, based here in San Jose. Each week we present a program on how to protect your lung health. Today we have two outstanding speakers. David Gonzalez is going to talk about indoor air quality, and we're going to talk about energy issues. Is it important to do what's called bioconversion? Fortunately, that kind of gibberish, we have Maayan Licht to explain the whole thing to us. See you in 30 seconds.
I have asthma, and so asthma, I can't do that many sports because I wheeze and then I have to take my inhaler. I can't do a lot of things other kids can do. What I learned at asthma camp is how to treat your asthma and don't hold back if you have asthma. Breathe California has made it easier for me to play sports and do other things that I couldn't do before.
Welcome back to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. I'm a volunteer, and I hope you will consider volunteering for Breathe California. So roughly 25% of our population in this county, 400,000 to 500,000, have breathing difficulties. We're going to be talking today about how to cut back on that by understanding indoor air quality or understanding the way our energy is made and what we can do about that. So first up is David Gonzalez. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
So indoor air quality, what in the heck is it? How is it different from outdoor air quality?
So indoor air quality is the quality of air that we have inside. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's overlooked. We always think about the outdoor air quality and the environment outside of our buildings, but we spend a lot more time inside, and it's an important thing to look at.
So I always say this in the classroom. Both of you have been my students. Why is it that only I'm protected in a classroom and you're not?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that only you're protected in the classroom and we're not. And I think one of them could be because you have the window open over there.
Yeah,
you're getting
that's
some
close
of that,
to me.
You're getting some of that air coming from outside. But there's a lot of different reasons why you could be protected. I mean, if you're talking about your own home, you're obviously aware, and that's another problem that we have with indoor air quality is there's not a lot of people that are aware of it, and we don't take care of that problem very well.
Yeah. So I was leading towards the indoor air quality issue. If you're in the workplace, we have laws, the OSHA, I don't know if you can explain what that is since I'm not supposed to use acronyms.
So OSHA takes care of workers on the workplace. So what you were alluding to, if I'm not mistaken, is the fact that you're actually at work and we were students in your class. And because you were a worker, you were taken care of through OSHA. OSHA actually manages some degree of air quality inside when you're on the workplace. However, for a student or a resident, they're not taken into that consideration.
So at school, at home, we're not protected from the kind of hazards that you're talking about.
Right. There's a number of hazards as well. I mean,
so what kind of hazards are we talking about? We all breathe the air, and unless there's some significant smell in it, we don't think there's a problem.
Right, that's a problem because a lot of the hazards that we have, you can't smell. So over here I have a chart and it shows different pollutants and different sources and different health impacts. And all of these pollutants are found inside of residential houses. They're also found in schools and places of business. But the scary part is they're in our houses, and anything from nitrogen dioxide from just cooking with your appliances to radon, which is found naturally in the ground and could be contaminating people that are in areas where that's prevalent.
Yeah, and that's a form of radioactivity. So
correct.
just walk us through each of these. How would you have carbon monoxide in your home or schools for that matter?
So carbon monoxide is, again, usually from heating appliances such as stoves, natural gas ovens. Also, older heaters emit a percent of carbon monoxide. The nice thing about that is there are a lot of precautionary tools out there. Most of the fire alarms nowadays also go off when the carbon monoxide levels reach a high level. They're dangerous because you can see over here, it can kill you. And even when it's not killing you, it has effects that will last a lifetime from prolonged.
So just as a quick analogy, my wife has Alzheimer's, and when I'm teaching, I have a caretaker there. But it's against the law for me not to have carbon monoxide protection for that caretaker. Wasn't required in my home until I hired somebody to work in the house. So I actually get a benefit out of it in that I went and bought smoke detectors, which also have carbon monoxide protection.
Right, and those types of positive externalities, they benefit everyone.
So what in the heck is an externality?
So what an externality is that's when we have a business and it has some type of effect on a third party. So say you and I are doing a transaction and you sell me something and I decide to use it. So let's say it's paper and I'm using paper and I'm tearing that paper up. Well, unfortunately, this paper is floating over and it's landing on Maayan over here. That would be a negative externality for her because now she has this paper all over her. A positive externality were to say you and I had a transaction and you gave me a handful of money and all I wanted to do with that money was throw it up in the air. Since Maayan is right next to me, she's going to get the positive externality of being able to grab the money as it comes down.
So you're absolutely right. And externalities that we usually talk about are people dumping their waste for free.
Right.
So I'm one of those horrible people. I drove here in a Prius at 47 miles a gallon, but all of the crud that came out of the gasoline combusted went into the air, and it's part of the air quality problems we're talking about. So you're talking about an externality here, which is a heater that doesn't burn properly is dumping waste that's going to hurt people indoors.
Right. That could happen. Heaters can emit carbon monoxide, and then when you get rid of them, there's the dumping problem. And what do we do with that? And when people have canisters of different hazardous wastes and they leave those out, sometimes they rust open and they start to leak in other ways. And I mean, it's either in your house or it's outside. But
well, you talked about canisters, and lo and behold, we have aerosols here, but you've got particulate matter. So explain what that is in plain English, because particulate matter is a sort of strange version of what?
So particulate matter is a complicated way of saying little particles in the air or little tiny pieces of things in the air.
So it's more than just dust?
It could be anything. A particle could be a piece of anything. It could be a piece of your jacket. It could be a piece of dried skin and dust. It's anything, and there's different sizes. The most dangerous size is the very small size. Generally, they're grouped in anywhere between 3 and 5 different sizes, depending on how scientific you're willing to get. And the very small ones are the most dangerous because they actually block your lungs and they stop the way that they function. So
you may notice David has health impacts. So if you carry particulate matter costs, this is what he was just talking about.
Right. The reduced lung function, of course, comes from the small particulates blocking those functioning lungs. And as a result, you get respiratory and heart disease. Heart disease is because of the lowered levels of oxygen. The heart can't function properly.
So our species invented fire, or learned how to use fire, might be a better way, only about 50,000 years ago, and we haven't adapted, our lungs haven't evolved to live with these small, they can't handle it.
Right. It's a big problem. And when we have things like ranges in our houses. I mean, we think of gas as being clean, but there is stuff that comes from the gas, and nitrogen dioxide is one of the things that comes from.
And there's a reason people have hoods in their homes,
right,
in their kitchens. So radon you mentioned, I think we can push on. This one is what everybody associates with Breathe
Right.
California, which is the use of tobaccos. So talk a little bit about that.
Right. So ETS, or environmental tobacco smoke, is probably one of the big things that people think about when they think about indoor air pollution. Politics-wise, it's one of the bigger things out there. People wanted smoking to stop in restaurants in the early 2000s and late 90s, and that happened because people can see smoking. People are affected by smoking. They think about it, unlike some of these other things. ETS has a large impact on us. The most current problem that we're dealing with is vaping and e-cigarettes.
Which basically have the same health impact on us as,
Correct.
as burning tobacco directly.
Correct. And I believe it was in 2014 they tried to put a regulation on that to stop it in bars and restaurants the way it is now. But there was so much pushback, the group actually got really concerned about their rights being halted, that they pushed back enough to stop that. So
in our county, 8.5% of people smoke, but anybody that chooses to get active and involved, and the rest of us who are affected by tobacco smoke just sit in our hands, they're
Right.
gonna win the discussion. So we're out of time. What kind of summary do you want people to have to remember this?
what are you breathing in your house? It's good to know. Get your house checked for radon, and ask the questions. Do some research.
So after this public service announcement, we're going to be talking with Maayan Licht about another problem that you need to think about, and a way for you to lead a little healthier life. See you then.
What it feels like to have an asthma attack is, well, you can't breathe and you can't tell anybody that you're having an asthma attack because you can hardly talk. You can maybe say 1 or 2 words, but you can't say much else. Breathe California has helped me come in contact with more asthmatics and more people who have the same case as I do. It's important to me because I don't feel like I'm alone in the fight against asthma.
Welcome back to Breathe California TV. We're now going to talk about energy issues with Maayan Licht. But first, let me sort of set the scene. Most people don't realize, but with the exception of the tobacco that David just talked about, our breathing difficulties are all based on how much and what kind of energy we use. So welcome, Maya.
Thank you. Hello.
So which aspect of our energy issues are you going to talk about?
So I'm actually here to talk about gasification, which is taking biomass or organic matter, things like our food waste, sewer, it could be wood, fiber, anything like that, and basically turning it into a gas, which creates energy.
So many people are involved with recycling of organic matter. Here is that stuff that we think might be going to compost, what we're talking about?
Yes, yes.
So is it better for it to be composted, or to be made into energy, or how does that work?
You know, I personally think that that it is better to compost, just because it's more of a natural cycle. You know, we're putting it back into the soil. It's something that then we can reuse, rather than just, you know, dumping it into a gas facility or a landfill, which just in the end creates methane gas into our atmosphere. So I think it's healthier and it's cleaner for our air if we do go more towards the composting, more of the sustainable way.
So I notice you've got a dump here.
Yeah.
Is this the fumes coming off of it?
Yeah, and that's the historical Mount Landfill. I just thought that was pretty funny, you know. Our landfills are just extremely full of trash. And it just keeps getting bigger, you know, as the populations grow. And it's one of our biggest issues right now. And, you know, we don't want to get to that point where it becomes a historical monument. You know, we want to take care of this problem.
Well, the scary thing is our audience can drive 101 or 880, and almost every mountain they see is trash.
That's right.
But the only exception I can think of is Coyote
Creek.
Hills.
Right, right.
But it's just amazing because when we run out of space, we cover them up with dirt and we try to make them into
a
parks or something.
Exactly.
So we've got an enormous surplus of compost, so much so that most of the compost that we are actually using is going to cover landfills of all things. Is there any left from that?
The compost that's left from the landfills?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. But I think composting is something that should be looked at, should be done maybe more on an individual level, more houses and things like that, and maybe then we can take it more to the facility level.
So how does the reduce, reuse, recycle fit in with your bioconversion?
So, you know, I just think that when it comes to our trash, one of the biggest things we need to focus on is not how do we get rid of our trash, but how do we reduce our trash? How to reduce our consumption, our overproduction of materials, food waste. By reducing our waste, we have less in our landfill. By reusing certain materials, by reusing certain food scraps, we're again reducing our landfill and recycling. All of that connects. You know, instead of trying to focus on, again, how do we get rid of our waste and create that into energy, let's focus on reducing our waste.
So, I mean, just to prove your point, about 6-7 years ago, the state changed the name of the agency from Waste Management to Cal Recycle.
Right.
On the theory that what we're really talking is about a resource and why are we wasting it?
Right, right. And that's actually one of the things with gasification that my research showed that trash alone cannot be used to create energy. They need to add other things in there to create energy, which means that we're using materials such as recyclable materials or actual trash that could, in the end, emit more chemicals, toxic chemicals into the atmosphere rather than properly disposing it. So it's an interesting concept, and I think it's an idea, but I think there's a lot of issues with gasification.
So explain how we get from the stuff we're throwing away here to gasification. There must be something that we're doing different. This obviously is throw all your waste in a trash can.
Trash, right.
So what's the different way of handling that ends in gasification?
So it's basically taking the biomass, all the organic matter, and you're combining it into this factory, and you're adding air and a little bit of water, just a little bit, and it creates, under combustion, it creates cygnus, which is the energy. So it's kind of how it works. It's this little process.
But it sounds like the segregation is really important in getting the waste stream so that it's only organics.
Right, right, and that's another thing. It's having to separate everything. It's having to figure out what actually is safe to burn, what actually isn't. But the question is, are facilities making that decision, or are we just throwing everything in there? We don't really know. It's very uncertain right now.
So contamination has been a big problem in San Jose, where people throw away trash in recycling barrels. So if I throw away my glass Snapple bottle in the yard waste container, I'm hurting the ability to gasify?
Yes, definitely. And instead, you could be reusing that glass, you know, make it into something else.
Or even using it over again.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So what's happening locally? I mean, it's obvious this is a great concept, but is somebody actually doing it here?
Yeah, so there's actually a demonstration facility in San Jose. It's in the San Jose Santa Clara wastewater facility. It's opened about a year ago, but it's just a demonstration. You know, they're just trying to see if gasification is actually something we could do. So far, they're burning up to 10 tons of trash a day, something like that. It's working, but there's still a lot of issues that they're coming, a lot of operational issues. It's not passing emission tests. So it is still raising a lot of questions whether this is the direction we should take.
So you kind of led into the obvious question, is this safe for us? We know that we're breathing unhealthy air here. Do we want something else in the air?
I don't think we do. You know, I think that a safer route would be let's stay away from gasification, stay away from taking all this toxic chemicals and putting in high heat and putting out into our atmosphere. And let's instead focus on renewable energy, something that we know is safe, something that we know doesn't harm the air that we breathe, and something that in the end can actually help to create a better future.
But most people would say bioconversion is renewable energy.
Not necessarily, because a lot of the trash that goes in there, 80% of it is non-renewable. So that means that non-renewable trash that we're putting into the gasification, that's emitting the methane gas into our atmosphere. And that does harm our lungs. There is health concerns with that.
I just, because I grew up with my kids grew up thinking I was a garbage man. On the East Coast, when we burn garbage, it's just to reduce the volume, to get rid of all of those resources, particularly the paper and the yard waste. It isn't because they get very much energy out of it. So you're talking about a system where you segregate out the good stuff that can be converted into fuel.
Yes.
And everything else you try to recycle.
Yeah, try to recycle, but again, going back to maybe trying to find other alternatives like composting on a more individual house level, reducing our waste. I think that's the biggest thing. Reusing, recycling, and maybe, using gasification as one of the ways, but not necessarily our attention should be on.
Well, I need a little help here. What do you mean by reducing our waste? You know, I think if I'm recycling something, I'm reducing the waste, but is that reducing?
It's one of the things. Reducing waste, I would say, is more just buying less things, consuming less stuff, buying less products, buying less food if we know we're not going to finish all the food. There's so much overproduction of food that just gets thrown into landfill, and what happens in the end? Methane gas just comes out of that. So really it just comes to reducing what we're buying, what we're eating, products, materials, all sorts of things, even clothes, shoes, anything that we can think of that we don't need. Why are we buying it? Why are we, putting our money in that?
So you complained about the methane gas. Is that worse than some of the pollutants that David was talking about?
It might not be as harmful, I would say, but it's still a health concern, and it's still something that you could smell. It's still something that can affect the environment and the people that live around those areas by the facilities.
Yeah, well, that plant that you're talking about, I can assure you, the mayor of Milpitas, where that city is downwind from both the sewage treatment plant and San Jose's garbage disposal site, they're actually in court right now trying to stop with the smell.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about the benefits of compost, if you can. Is that something we ought to do at home, or should we throw it away in yard waste?
I think composting is a great alternative to our waste. It's very simple. You just take a little bin, put some food scraps. Obviously, not everything is composted. This could be things like eggshells, vegetables, fruit, anything like that. And in the end, it slowly decomposes, and we put it back into the soil. It's just such a simple cycle. We're just putting it back into the earth the way it should have been put back, not just thrown into a landfill or thrown into a facility and burned to make energy.
So my city owns its own utilities, and getting ready to talk to you about this, I found a flyer that said, help stop water waste, compost. You got any idea what in the heck's behind that?
Water waste compost.
No, to stop water waste, compost. So I don't want to answer the question. Hopefully you've got an answer.
I would say, again, a lot of these facilities, it does still take water. Gasification might not take as much water as other things like burning coal, things like that. But it still uses water. It's something that we don't have. Where composting, you don't need water. You know, you just put it into the bin, like I was saying, or again, other companies can have bigger things, and it just decomposes without any use of water, air, oxygen, nothing like that. Just
So,
soil.
how about food waste? Should that go into compost?
Yes, yes. So food waste, not everything, not things like meat and dairy, those things don't go in there. But things like fruit, vegetables, bread, fiber, grains, things like that, those are all could be composted.
So is there some spot where you think it would be okay to gasify the organic part of our waste? You know, as an example, LA relies on electricity generated in Utah.
Right.
They have such bad air quality, they don't want it burned there, so they're using it from a plant that burns in an area that has pristine air quality. Should we switch to gasifying in Eureka and then just put the electricity into the grid?
It's a tough question to answer, just because, again, there's just a lot of issues that come with gasification, a lot of things that we're still uncertain about. I mean, yes, I think it's one way to tackle one of our biggest problems, which is waste and obviously needing energy, especially with coal and oil running out. But I think there's better things out there. I think there's better alternatives. And it's like I was mentioning earlier, we need energy. Well, let's go to renewable energy, something that's safer, cleaner. We need to get
And I think that's a wonderful message for everybody, something that's safer and cleaner.
Exactly.
So we've been talking about air and energy quality issues. See you next week with something almost as exciting, maybe more.